Hey, this is Mr. MegaManFan, and if you like Homebrew Review, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like and a comment below the video and let me know what you thought of it. Thanks! We're taking a look at The Machine today from Incubate Games. Now, I'm only going to play about 10 minutes into this game for a couple of reasons. One, this is a press release version, which is not the full version of the game, and as noted in the intro of the game, some features are not available and some may be different from the final product. The second reason is I feel like if I play too deeply into this game, it's going to have some spoilers for people who actually want to purchase the game, which you can get through Incubate's website once it is fully assembled and ready to ship. So, for both of those reasons, I'm going to limit this playthrough to about 10 minutes, but I can attest to the fact that having played it, I can see a very good reason to want to order this game because it's the type of structured narrative that a player of Link's Awakening would appreciate. In this game, you are obviously living in a very dystopian future, one not unlike the Fallout games where humanity has been confined to certain living quarters that they cannot escape from, and the harsh realities of the real world outside of it are completely unknown to them. Now, I don't know if the protagonist in this game ever escapes from the machine because, as I said, I'm not playing that far into it and I don't want to give you spoilers, but I do know that his life in the machine is pretty miserable. First, there's this quiz that you have to take that determines the entire structure of your life. Their words, not mine. It's like a really amped up version of one of those high school career aptitude tests where they find out what vocation you're best suited for. But this one's even worse because you don't know the answers and you can either cheat to guess the answers or you can just randomly pick the answers. I suppose if you played this game more than once, you would already know what all the correct answers are, but I did not. So I guessed and I cheated and I did everything I could and I still only got 2 out of 10. At which point the teacher tells you, well, you're not suited for much of anything but menial work, so good luck with that. Enjoy the rest of your life. And so the downward spiral begins. Now, since I referenced Fallout earlier, I should make a note. I'm not saying there are mutants in this game, and I'm not saying that you have abilities that you can upgrade with various enhancements. I was just saying the world sucks. The world you live in sucks. The world outside could be even worse compared to the machine, but the world in this machine is pretty bad because once you leave here, you've got 2 choices. You can either become a cop or become a factory worker. You can either be the man or work for the man. Now, at first, the option that seemed to make sense for me was, well, my uncle is a cop, so he wants me to join the force. I'll join the force. I'll be the man. If I gotta be stuck in this machine, I might as well make the best of my lot in life. But this protagonist, he doesn't know the right answers, nor did I. And so when he goes to join the force, the cop asks him, have you ever been on drugs? And it gives you 2 choices. One is tell the truth, and then in parentheses say yes. And the other is lie. I'm like, well, obviously, in this dystopian future, my protagonist has used drugs to escape from the tedium of the world he lives in. Otherwise, it wouldn't say, tell the truth, yes. So I answered yes, and the cop got mad at me, and he said, how dare a druggie disrespect me like that? No druggie would dare come into my hallowed, my sacred sanctuary for training officers and say they've used drugs. Now, tell the truth. And what am I supposed to do at that point? Like, I already told the truth, so I'm going to tell the truth again. And then he gets mad and slaps me. And he says, I dare you to say that one more time. And now I'm getting kind of pissed off. I'm like, okay, you've given me that choice twice now. Why am I going to change my answer? So I said it again, and he slaps me. And then it gives you the choice, fight back or don't. And I chose fight back, and I promptly got kicked out of the police academy. So then the downward spiral continues even further, which makes me think that that's basically the point of the machine, is to brutalize you and punish you for trying to do the right things, or even when you don't do the right things, you still get screwed anyway. Because the next thing that happened was, I don't have a job, so I can't pay the rent, so I get kicked out of the apartment I'm sharing with my roommate Toe, and I'm forced to go live in the slums. And the only choice you have when you're living in the slums is to pick up the guy's trash. His name is HUD. And if you don't pick up his trash, he's going to kick you out of his groveling hovel, his low-lying quarters in the deep recesses of the machine. So you pick up his stinky socks, and you become the errand boy for the people that are sharing this filthy hovel with you. You have to carry drugs for them. That's what I'm saying. This is a dour game. If you were looking for something that's like a bright beam of joy, a rainbow of sunshine, the machine is probably not the game for you, because even if I was making all of the right choices in every one of these scenarios, I still have a feeling that this would be a uniquely dystopian hell. But the reason I compared it to Fallout was, one, because the world sucks. Whether you're in the machine or out, it's gonna suck. I have that feeling. I'm very convinced of that. And two, you do have choices, whether or not they improve your lot in life. You can make choices. You can progress the story. Hopefully there's a happy ending somewhere along here. But that's also why I compare it to Link's Awakening, because, I mean, obviously, aside from the fact that it's on a Game Boy and it has tile-based sprites like Link's Awakening does, it's also, how do I put this? You're scrolling from screen to screen, and you're doing interactions with things on each screen. You're picking up items, you're talking to other characters. I assume at some point you're probably going to have to fight some battles with some monsters or some thugs or somebody. So it's got that interactive adventure quality where you're roaming around an environment and doing things. Now, obviously, in this early part of the game, it's a very narrative-driven game. But later on, I have a feeling you get much more free will, because the game is certainly designed in that way that makes you think you can make choices, even if it's driving you towards a downward spiral. You're choosing that downward spiral, if you get what I'm saying. I like this game just because it's something that I don't think the Game Boy saw very much of. It saw plenty of adventure games. You know, there's the Saga games, or as they were known in this country, Final Fantasy games. They got rebranded. And of course, Link's Awakening, and of course, other famous RPG series that got ports to Game Boy, and some original titles as well. But maybe not anything quite so monolithically, diametrically opposed to your very existence. This game really makes you feel like you're a cog in a machine. It's not just a figure of speech, it's what you are. You're either taking part in what the machine has designed for you to do, or you're getting ripped out of the machine and replaced by a part that works better than you. So you make your best of your lot in life with this game and try to progress. Now here's some good news and some bad news if you're planning on picking up this game. The good news is the next batch of pre-orders goes live on February 16th, so you can get in on it and get a copy. The bad news, it's going to be $59.99 for a complete in-box physical edition of the game. It's not cheap, but nothing is in this current age of struggle and uncertainty, much like the machine itself, I suppose. It's just the global conditions we're living with right now. I don't think it's an unreasonable price for an intriguing game like this. So thank you to Incubate Games for giving me a chance to review this one for all of you. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and this has been Homebrew Review. If you decide to get it for yourself, let me know what you thought. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Welcome back to Homebrew Review, and this week we are taking a look at INV Plus, or if you prefer, Invaders Plus, for the Atari VCS, aka Atari 2600. This was the first attempt, at least as far as I know, and seemingly as far as history records, for an Atari version of Space Invaders to have the full 11 columns of invaders with 5 invaders per each column. Previous attempts had not been able to replicate this, and obviously some compromises were necessary. The invaders look like pixelated blocks as opposed to having their actual alien shapes, but this is still preferable to the official Atari release Space Invaders, which had much fewer columns of aliens and much less authentic gameplay compared to the original Space Invaders game. For example, the UFO behavior in this version is authentic in that if you're counting the number of shots you've fired, you can actually control the value of the UFO from 50 to 100 to 150 to 300 points. Not the easiest thing in the world to do, but it's there for those who have that knowledge of the authentic Space Invaders from the 1970s and can play it by memory that way. They can still play it that way with this version. The only other complaint, which would be a relatively minor complaint, other than the blocky appearance of the aliens, which was just necessary for keeping a version that would work in the limitations of the Atari 2600, is that the bases at the bottom feel a little small compared to the real versions. So my strategy of like drilling a hole through a base to shoot up at a line of invaders isn't really practical here. I had to adjust ever so slightly to my gameplay. In other versions of Space Invaders where you can't drill up through the base and really shield yourself behind it while playing, I do a more bob and weave approach where I will try to clear a line and then move out of the way before they retaliate, and then move back, and then when they retaliate again, I move out of the way, and I kind of go back and forth that way. But other than that, the same gameplay strategies that I normally employ work with this version of Space Invaders, such as clearing the lines before they get to the edge of the screen so that it takes them longer to drop down a level when they come back the other direction. You want to clear out those lines to stop that marching invader army from reaching the bottom row way too fast. This version of Space Invaders was a joint collaboration of coding between Eric Mooney and Piero Cavina, and as of the recording of this video, it has been available in the AtariAge.com/store for many years and still is today. And I proudly own a copy of this cart that came in a very nice shell with a glossy label and a full color instruction manual to boot. It also added some nice features for the Atari VCS home enthusiasts, such as the ability to set the refresh rate to PAL or NTSC, 50 or 60 hertz depending on the region that you live in. There's a 2-player co-op mode, so you can tag team it up with a friend, grab 2 joysticks, and both take on an alien wave together. There's an invisible invaders mode if you really want to challenge yourself by shooting at things that you can't see. And there's even an Easter egg hidden in the game, so they really pulled out all the stops when it came to creating this version of Space Invaders. And the fact they had to make some compromises to make it more authentic to the gameplay is what I would say most programmers did for home console adaptations of video games in the 1980s. Obviously, the first version of Space Invaders was the best they could do at the time with the knowledge they had, but fast forward 20, 25 years later, This is the new limit of what they were capable of in recreating the authentic Space Invaders experience. Now, if it seems like I'm bashing the Atari version that came out for the VCS, I should clarify that that was a system seller in every respect. Space Invaders was a worldwide phenomenon. It was a huge arcade hit, and the Atari VCS was the first home edition of Space Invaders you could play. So even if it wasn't 100% authentic to the arcade, it presented a good enough facsimile that people bought Atari VCS consoles just to play Space Invaders at home. Many, many, many Atari 2600s were sold on the strength of this game. So I'm not knocking the Atari original Space Invaders. I'm just saying this is what it could have been if they knew what programmers know today back in the late 1970s and early 1980s. They could have made this. They just didn't have that way to trick and tweak out the Atari VCS that was gained over years of trial and error experience, decoding what the chips inside of it were capable of, pushing the video to the limits of what the Atari can render on the screen at a time. It required a lot of finesse, and that knowledge base had to build up over the decades, and it took a very dedicated and enthusiastic Atari homebrew scene with sites like AtariAge.com supporting it, encouraging it, and even providing physical releases when somebody created something good enough to share with the rest of the world. It was a labor of love for everyone involved, and the fruits of this labor are what I consider to be the most playable version of Space Invaders on Atari 2600. Just put aside the fact that the aliens don't look like aliens. Just play it like Space Invaders and it feels right. The speed of the aliens when you knock out more of them ramps up appropriately. The background sound, that endless march, it increases in tempo accordingly. The UFO behavior is right. The strategies that you will use to clear the alien waves, whether you sweep along underneath or you take them out one column at a time or you mix and match the two or you have a play style that I haven't even described yet, anything that you know how to do with Space Invaders will feel right when you're doing it with IMV+. And I would say not just to try this in emulation, because the ROM is freely available at AtariAge.com, so you can demo it to your heart's content. But I would say if you have an Atari 2600 and you only have the Space Invaders version that was released by Atari, spend $25, get this cartridge, put it in your Atari VCS or your Retron 77 or Sears Video Arcade, or in television with the Atari adapter, or ColecoVision with the Atari adapter. Whatever method you choose, you will get full joy out of IMV+. It is the kind of game you will lose yourself in for dozens and dozens of hours. It doesn't get tiresome easily. The gameplay is so true to Space Invaders that if you ever played the arcade game, what else can I say? It's for the Space Invaders fan. If you like Space Invaders, IMV+ is for you. I think that's the highest praise I can give it. It's such a good homebrew that you wish Atari had released it this way back in the day, and it would have been an even bigger hit for them than it already was. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and as always, thank you for watching. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Welcome back to Homebrew Review, and today we're going to talk about Infinity for Game Boy Color. Now, I believe this also works on Game Boy, but it is clearly designed with the Game Boy Color in mind. Now, when I first got the email from Incubate Games a few weeks ago about this title, there was a little bit of confusion out there over who exactly was developing Infinity, whether it was the original dev team that started on it in 1999 or an entirely new dev team, or some mixture of the two, and various licensing and contract issues and minutiae that you probably don't care about. But it stirred up a bit of a kerfuffle on the internet, and I saw a couple of YouTubers whose names I won't mention because I like both of them got into a public tit for tat about it, and I just thought at the time that I should wait and let some of that blow over before addressing the game, and since then the people behind this project have put out a statement saying everything is kosher here, we finished this game above board, there was nothing backroom or backhanded about it. So I'm just going to link to the Kickstarter in the description of this video, and you can find out more details and go down that rabbit hole for yourself if you want to, but to me it seems to be pretty legit. It's already fully funded on Kickstarter anyway, so me mentioning this or putting the Kickstarter link in the description doesn't affect whether or not this game will come out. It's already developed, it's already backed. They're just going to put the polish on it and then release it in a physical form. So we're going to talk about the game and not any of those other things today. And it does look to be a very promising game based on this demo ROM that Incubate Games very courteously sent me for a review. So thank you to them for this review copy. If it's not final, it looks close enough to final that it's fully playable and I can get the full experience out of playing it here for you. Now, the top-down display of this game should already look very familiar to most of you. Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening is the first game that draws to mind, but also it has similarities to Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, any of those classic games from the 90s when Japanese role-playing games really took the world by storm, or at least in North America, they made a major dent in the minds and hearts of video gamers such as myself. And what you are finding in this game is a fairly typical plot for one of those role-playing games where two opposing forces are clashing. In this case, a malevolent king who has created an army to fight a war, and a disgraced knight named Connor who wants nothing to do with the king or the war and blames the king for what happened to his wife Anna and holds a grudge for all this time. Their many years apart have not tempered his anger. They've actually, if anything, hardened his resolve and made him even more bitter. And that's where our game begins, is the king sends his guards to summon Connor, and he is none too happy to see them. They keep addressing him as, "Sir Connor, the king has requested your presence." He's like, "There's no sir here. Leave me alone. I don't want anything to do with this." They don't really give him a choice, though. They immediately hit him with, "Failure to obey a summons from the king is treason." So Connor, being a practical man and knowing he'd be dragged out of here in chains to the king anyway, or perhaps thrown in a dungeon for his insolence, is like, fine, if it's going to be that way, if I have to get dragged out of here in chains or I can walk out under my own power, I'll walk. I'll go see the king. I don't really want to, but I'll find out what he wants. I'll talk to him. And that is the basic plot that you get going in. Along the way, you can do the usual RPG things. You can talk to people in the town by pressing the action button. You can go to the shop and buy equipment with this game's form of currency, which you can find a little bit of if you search your home. Like a very typical RPG, you've got to search everything that you see. Look in the pots, look in the chests, look in the drawers, go everywhere, touch everything, get the Aurum, get the healing items, get everything you need. Then go and equip yourself with weapons, armor, potions, magic spells, anything you can afford with the amount of currency that you have. Although you're not going to be doing a lot of fighting early on in this game because you're basically just following it through to learn what the plot is. Like I said, you can interact, you can equip yourself, but the fighting comes a little later on, unless you very purposefully go out in the woods outside of town and wander around instead of going straight to the castle, because you can encounter random monster battles, but I really don't recommend doing that. I guess it's up to you. The game is not forcing you to follow a linear path, but don't you want to progress the plot? Don't you want to not get killed before you speak to the king and find out what he wants? That's what I'd recommend. Now, getting back to the development of this game for just a moment, I just got another press release in the mail the other day that said, well, congratulations backers, we've hit all our Kickstarter stretch goals, so now we're going to add something extra to this game. We're going to add a Game Boy Advanced Enhanced mode. So, like the original Shantae for Game Boy Color from Way Forward Games, they're going to put features into this game that will only show up if you put it into a Game Boy Advance or Game Boy player. Hopefully that means they'll also work in a Pocket, but I can't tell you that for sure because the game isn't even out yet and the Analog Pocket doesn't ship for another month if it ships on time. They had to delay it from May to October. There are obvious reasons for that. There are chip shortages everywhere for every manufacturer, but Analog has been better than most when it comes to meeting their deadlines. Even if they've had to postpone one, they usually come through on the next one. So I fully expect to receive my Analog Pocket next month, and I will be doing a review of it when it comes in. But as I said, there's no way to confirm what the enhanced features are until the game comes out, and then I'll play them on a Game Boy Advance of some kind. Whether it's a third-party one or the original, it'll just be whatever I have to do. Perhaps those features would even work in the Game Boy player on GameCube, but that remains to be seen. Meeting the stretch goals also unlocked localized versions in Japanese and French, as well as a song added to the soundtrack by Yuzo Koshiro from Streets of Rage fame. I don't know which song in the game that is, the press release doesn't say, but I do enjoy the soundtrack as it exists here. It changes from city to castle to overworld, so there's a good variety here. It's not one song endlessly on a loop. And the plot is enough to get me invested in Infinity and want to play it further without having the whole thing laid out for me detail by detail. You know enough to get you going, but not the whole story. You don't really understand why the king betrayed Connor, why Connor feels betrayed, what really happened to Anna. You get hints from the cutscenes when you start the game up, but you don't get the full explanation, and you get the sense from what's going on here that a war is being engineered by one side or the other, and there may be greater forces at work than either of these two warring kingdoms know about. There may be an unseen hand pushing and pulling all of the pawns on the chessboard, and Connor and the king are both wrapped up in this larger malevolent evil that they don't even know about. And that is exactly what's going to draw you into a story like this. Like, it's not just the protagonist and the antagonist. There are greater things at stake here, perhaps the fate of the kingdom, multiple kingdoms, the whole world. Who knows, maybe even the galaxy or the universe. I don't know how far this reaches. It's called Infinity, so maybe it reaches to the infinite vastness of space. I'm going to suspect it's a little more grounded than that, but I never say never in these kind of games, because who would have expected the twists and turns of games like Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross before you played them for the first time? Now, if you read a strategy guide or spoilers, you knew about all those twists and turns, but I tried to go into both of those games fully unaware. I didn't read all the spoilers ahead of time, and I only looked up something if I absolutely got stuck and couldn't make any further progress in the game. Here we meet a mischievous man who calls himself the Creator, and his creations are these golems that serve the king that basically make up the brunt of his army. He doesn't even have to conscript various citizens of the kingdom to be his soldiers, because these golems will do all the dirty work for him. The Creator, who I would just as soon call the Toy Maker, because he refers to his creations as toys, he's not very good at keeping them in line, because he tells you to play with his toys, and one of them goes crazy and starts attacking you. So unless you did some random wandering outside of the castle or the city, This will be your first real battle when you play Infinity. And the battle system is pretty straightforward. Even if you haven't played role-playing games before, it shouldn't be hard to pick up on the fact that you get turns to attack, and in between turns you can either select items or spells or just do your turn in the battle and fight. You get to choose each round, and you also have the ability to move and select your target. There's nothing too out of the ordinary for it if you're already familiar with the tropes of these games, and even if you're not, I think you can pick it up rather quickly. One of the advantages of playing it on a system like Game Boy or Game Boy Color, or even the Game Boy Advance if you use the GBA Enhanced features, is that there's a limited number of buttons at your disposal. There's a D-pad, A and B, select and start. So they can't overly complicate things. They have a menu system that you can go into to equip items, check your status, heal yourself, and that sort of thing. But beyond that, it's not going to become overly burdensome. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a modern twin-stick RPG where one is your movement and the other is the camera, and then you've got a wide variety of buttons that give you quick access to weapons and spells and to rotating party members. All of that's great. I'm not knocking it. But I do like the simplicity of a game like Infinity, where you're able to jump in right away without really having to memorize a whole bunch of different things that you'll need to reference later on. So if you like a game that lets you jump into the deep water without having to worry about drowning, I think Infinity will meet your fix. And fans of 2D RPGs from the 90s, Link's Awakening and Secret of Mana, so on and so forth, will thoroughly enjoy this one. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend it based on the demo ROM that I've seen here. The final version may of course be different, so keep an eye on the Kickstarter page and all future developments as they are announced by Incubate Games. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This has been Homebrew Review, taking a look at Infinity for Game Boy Color. Like, share, subscribe, all of those things help the channel grow, and I'll see you next Wednesday with a brand new Homebrew Review, as well as new content every single day. Come back every day, there's always something new from Mr. MegaManFan. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you all again in a future video. Hello Megamaniacs, and welcome back to Homebrew Review. Today we are looking at Jesse Yeager in Cleopatra's Curse. This one has an interesting story behind it. A month or so ago, I was just casually hanging out on Sarumaru's Discord, #SarroCrew, and somebody said in the general chat, "Hey, would anybody like to help me test my new retail storefront?" I thought, retail storefront? And he wouldn't say exactly what for in the general chat, so I messaged him privately and said, "Hey, what's all this about?" And he said, "Well, I've got this game for TurboGrafx with a CD adapter, or Turbo Duo, and it was originally on Kickstarter, and now it's available to the general public, but I haven't really started doing retail sales yet, so I need to make sure this is working properly. That's why I didn't want to say what it was in the general chat." I'm like, okay, I understand that. You're being cautious. You don't want to start selling it to dozens of excited people and then not be able to fulfill their orders. So I'll be your guinea pig. I like TurboGrafx games. I like Turbo Duo CD games. What do you got? And he said, "It's Jesse Yeager in Cleopatra's Curse. It's an adventure game, and if you have a Turbo Duo, I think you'll like it." I said, "You got me sold. What's it cost?" And he gave me the information, and I went to the Bold Game Studios website using the link he provided and went through the whole procedure. Added it to my cart, clicked checkout, and he said, "Yeah, it went through. Payment was received." And I said, "When will I get it?" And he said, "I'm going to let the website send you the confirmation email because I want to make sure this process is working thoroughly. If I give you shipping tracking information right now, it won't be accurate." I'm like, that's different, but that's fine. I understand if you have some sort of script that auto-generates it, I'll just wait. And sure enough, I'd say within 24 hours, maybe even as little as 3 or 6 hours, I got an email saying, "Congratulations on your purchase. Your order will be shipped to this address." And everything looked correct and proper, so I was like, sweet. I'm getting a new TurboGrafx Turbo Duo game that I didn't even know about before I made this transaction. I'd like to note in advance as you watch this footage that I don't have any way to play this on an emulator, and I don't have a capture card for my Turbo Duo. And even if I did, it would be a real pain to find a way to hook it up because my Turbo Duo is mounted in a cabinet along with an Atari 5200 and a 3DO, and getting anything in or out of there with all the cords already running in and out would be extremely difficult. So please accept that I'm capturing it the best way I possibly can with a smartphone mounted to a tripod pointed directly at the screen while the game was playing. Let me tell you a little more about the game from the Kickstarter that was originally used to fund this game. It had 345 backers that pledged $27,468 to make this game a reality. Here's what the Kickstarter's creator Kyle Thompson had to say when it was first launched. Jesse Yeager and Cleopatra's Curse is a new Metroidvania-style game for Sega Genesis, TurboGrafx 16, and TurboGrafx Super CD. Explore Cleopatra's crypt to find the pieces of her sarcophagus and save your grandpa from her curse. Cleopatra's Curse is near completion already. All footage provided is recorded directly from in-game. The Super CD version is complete and will be sent for manufacturing once the Kickstarter has finished. The Sega Genesis version is nearly finished. Production will begin soon after Super CD. Why Kickstarter? This will help me determine how many copies to produce, as well as allowing me to purchase the equipment to generate more retro games for these consoles in the future. Why no stretch goals? The game is complete, and thus adding major changes to the game might delay it or cause unexpected issues. Seems from that like Mr. Thompson is pretty straightforward and on the level, which really isn't surprising to me since I got the game in the mail after I purchased it, but it is good to know that somebody launched a Kickstarter and set realistic expectations like, hey, I already have a game, I want to know if you guys want it, and if you do, I'll print a bunch of copies and send it out. And people apparently responded enthusiastically to that because it was funded fully and it was sold and sent to people. So congratulations, Kyle. You did a good thing. You had a Kickstarter that fulfilled its promises and was worth people putting their money into. It shouldn't be rare to say that because Kickstarter should be for projects that people are able to fulfill, but as we all know from watching things like Slope's Game Room, that doesn't always turn out to be the case. Here's the team for you. Kyle Thompson, aka Dark Kobold, he did the programming and the game design. Mishirin is a pixel artist and remixer extraordinaire. For more information about her, go to the Dark Kobold Kickstarter. There's a link to her YouTube channel. Derek and Brandon Feister did the fantasy music that you hear throughout the game, and there's a link to their Bandcamp here as well. DBFIECHTER, bandcamp.com. And Tennokoe wrote the chiptunes for Genesis, TENNOKOE, bandcamp.com. The game features 480 rooms, 6 boss fights, 2 different endings, 3 different weapons, many items to collect and secrets to find, Red Book audio using Sega CD, save game support, and 6-button controller support for Genesis and TurboGrafx 16. There are a couple of asterisks next to those last 2 items, so I should add the additional information that Kyle added. Number 1, SRAM is on cart for Sega Genesis CD unit internal memory or Turbo Booster Plus for TurboGrafx 16. Number 2, TurboGrafx 16 consoles require an adapter to use any PC Engine 6-button game. Gamepad adapter not included. And then he says, rather than tell you about the game, try it for yourself, which I assume was another reason this Kickstarter was successfully funded in full, because he put downloads for the Genesis version, the Super CD version, and even some fan art available to print on your CD if you wanted to keep the demo copy that you burned. That's really going the extra mile. As for the game itself, I can say I had a lot of fun playing it, and it reminded me of a lot of retro games that I have played over the years and am well familiar with from childhood on to the present day, starting with Montezuma's Revenge. I got that vibe almost immediately from the platforms, the ladders, the ropes, the keys you have to collect to unlock different areas. That is a very nostalgic feel, and even if that wasn't a direct inspiration from Cleopatra's Curse, I appreciate it. Now, he did describe it on the Kickstarter as a Metroidvania, and I can see that part as well, because there are areas that you can't access until you get items, so a little bit of backtracking is required. For example, there's a boomerang that you need to collect to activate the switches. I was trying to jump and reach the switch, and even if I ran and jumped and landed on it, it still wouldn't activate. So without the boomerang to throw at the switch to flip it on and off, you're not going to be able to advance to that part. So you're going to have the Metroidvania, Castlevania Metroid style forward tracking, backtracking. To some people, that's a negative, but if you like the genre, that's a positive because it rewards you for exploring. When you get items, you get new areas opened up to you that you can explore and go further into the game and get to the next level, next area, next mystery, next dungeon boss, next whatever, and you get to explore more, and it sucks you into the story. It's a fairly simple story, to be honest. Your grandpa was some sort of explorer, archaeologist, and Indiana Jones type. He ran into the Curse of Cleopatra and got transformed into a stone statue, and now that he's cursed, he needs somebody to rescue him. So Jessie Yeager is on her way to save the day and find the cure for what ails her grandpa and save her from Cleopatra's curse. I don't think you need more of a premise for an exploration game than that. It's good enough. It doesn't have to be, oh my god, here's this epic heroic journey. You're battling Ganon and saving Hyrule and rescuing the princess. No, this is just fine. Your grandpa's been cursed. Now go save him. Get through these dungeons, find these items, and do whatever you have to do, defeat whatever bosses you have to defeat, and save the day. Hooray! There are challenges to this that keep you on your toes throughout. You have falling platforms, which I didn't expect right away. You have rolling spikes that will continue their progress down the screen. They don't just move on a fixed loop. And as mentioned, you need the boomerang to access different areas that you couldn't previously get to. But it also helps you because it's the first weapon you get where you can help from taking damage from the bats and snakes and other things that fly around and sneak around and pester you in various ways. You can throw the boomerang at them to knock them out, and you get points for that. But you also get points for the items you collect. So besides solving the mazes and exploring till you get all the things you need, there is a score element here where if you're keeping track of your score, you can play it that way, and you could even do speed runs for first to get to so many points or first to clear this section of Cleopatra's Curse. I'm sure you could set up a speedrunning board for any number of criteria with this game. It has a lot of different things to offer. The graphical design is very pleasing. It's not quite cartoonish, but it does feel animated and friendly in a 16-bit pixel way. The sprite is large and colorful for Jessie Yeager. She's very good at moving back and forth. It doesn't look janky. There are enough frames of animation that keep you on track when you're moving from one room to the next. Everything is easy to access. You hit the run button to go down to the menu and select your items, as I just did here with the boomerang. And it also shows you the map of the area that you're in if you've collected the map, and keeps track of your money and how much time you've been playing and all of those other important facts. Switching screens from platforming to items reminds me a little bit of A Link to the Past or Link's Awakening, and I think that's just fine. It's a very good way to switch from gameplay to selecting items from your inventory, so if it works, why not borrow from it and use it for your own? There's obviously a fixed number of tiles to generate all of the rooms and the items in each room, but they're nice and colorful, and they don't tend to overstay their welcome by repeating themselves too much. You get variations like these broken pillars and these light fixtures on the wall, so everything is kept interesting as you move from one fixed screen to the next. You even get skeletons here and there to remind you of the unlucky travelers who did not fare as well as you or your grandpa. I mean, he may have been turned into a stone statue, but at least you could still save him. He's not a pile of bones. Having not bought a Super CD-ROM game, let alone a Homebrew CD-ROM game for Turbo Duo for quite a while, I was very pleasantly surprised by Jesse Yeager and Cleopatra's Curse. I thought maybe this game would only have me demonstrating it for a few minutes, but I kept on playing even after I was done filming because it's that much fun. And the best news is that you don't even need to have a Turbo Duo or a TurboGrafx with the CD attachment to play it, because he has ported it to a wide variety of platforms, as I mentioned when I was reading all of the listings on Kickstarter. So if you have something other than Turbo Duo and you want to play this, you've got the choice. Just go to BoldGameStudios.com, check out his retail storefront, and see which version would work for whichever console you have. Or if you don't have any of those consoles, choose a digital-only version, play it in emulator, and I'm sure you'll have some fun there as well. I might just pick up the Sega Genesis or the Game Boy versions just so I can do that and see how they compare to this one right here. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This has been Homebrew Review, and thank you to Dark Kobold for giving me the chance to be the guinea pig and be the first person to buy his game from his retail storefront. I'm glad I did. It was well worth it. See you all for another Homebrew Review when the next one is ready to do.